There's a place in America where silence isn't just part of the punishment. It's the punishment itself. A prison so controlled, so calculated, that even time begins to feel distorted. Inside its walls, men don't just serve sentences, they disappear into them. This is ADX Florence, the most secure prison in the United States. A place built not just to contain the most dangerous individuals alive, but to strip away everything that makes them human. No conversations, no physical contact, no escape from your own thoughts. But what happens when a man doesn't break under that pressure and instead begins to understand it? For one inmate, ADX didn't destroy him the way it was meant to. It forced him to see something no one else had ever seen. And what he discovered would quietly challenge the idea that this prison was truly unbreakable. Before we go deeper inside, make sure you subscribe, because these aren't just crime stories. They're real psychological battles that most people never hear about. Hidden in the remote landscape of Colorado, ADX Florence appears almost peaceful from a distance. The surrounding mountains stretch endlessly. The sky is wide and open, and there's a stillness that feels almost calming. But that calm is deceptive, because behind those reinforced walls lies one of the most controlled environments ever created. ADX Florence was designed with a single philosophy in mind: absolute control. Every detail inside the facility serves that purpose. The cells are made of thick concrete, built to absorb sound and eliminate communication. Doors are solid steel. Movement is restricted to the second. Even the architecture is intentional, constructed in a way that prevents inmates from forming any sense of connection with the outside world. Inmates spend 23 hours a day inside a single cell. Meals are passed through a narrow slot. Recreation, if allowed, takes place alone in a small enclosed area. There are no shared spaces, no casual interactions. Even eye contact is rare. Over time, the isolation begins to take on a different weight. It's no longer just loneliness. It becomes something heavier, something harder to define, a slow, quiet pressure that builds inside the mind. And for many inmates, that pressure is where the real sentence begins. Marcus Hale didn't arrive at ADX Florence with headlines or media attention. There were no cameras, no public outrage, no widely known story attached to his name. On paper, he was simply classified as a high-risk inmate, someone the system believed required the highest level of control. But Marcus's past suggested something different. Before his conviction, he had been known for his discipline and composure. He wasn't impulsive. He wasn't reckless. He was calculated, quiet, and observant, the kind of person who noticed details others ignored. When he entered ADX, he didn't resist. He didn't argue. He followed every instruction with precision. To the guards, he seemed like one of the easier inmates to manage. But what they didn't realize was that Marcus wasn't adjusting to the system. He was studying it. As he was escorted to his cell for the first time, Marcus took in everything: the timing of the doors, the rhythm of footsteps, the way sound traveled to the corridor. Even in that moment, surrounded by control, he was already observing patterns. Because for Marcus, control wasn't something to fear. It was something to understand. At first, the routine felt manageable. The structure gave Marcus something to hold on to. He woke up at the same time each day, ate at the same intervals, and spent hours sitting in silence, in a place designed to remove unpredictability. The consistency was almost comforting. But as the days turned into weeks, the silence began to change. It was no longer neutral. It became oppressive, like a constant presence pressing against his thoughts. Without conversation or distraction, Marcus's mind became louder. Memories resurfaced with unusual clarity. Small details from his past replayed endlessly. Time became difficult to track. Days blended together until they felt indistinguishable. The human brain isn't built for this kind of isolation. It seeks stimulation, connection, variation. When those are removed, it starts to compensate in unpredictable ways. Marcus began to notice subtle sounds: the distant echo of footsteps, the faint hum of ventilation, the metallic click of doors opening and closing somewhere beyond his reach. At first, they were just background noise, but over time, they became something else. They became signals. 3 months into confinement, Marcus experienced his first real shift. It didn't happen suddenly. It was gradual, almost unnoticeable at first. He began to anticipate certain sounds before they happened. A door would open, and he would already be expecting it. Footsteps would pass, and he could predict their direction. At first, he assumed it was coincidence, but the pattern continued. That's when he started paying closer attention. Marcus began tracking time mentally, using the sounds around him as reference points. He counted seconds between movements. He noted changes in rhythm. He built a structure in his mind where none existed physically. In a place designed to eliminate control, Marcus was creating his own version of it. The silence was no longer empty. It was full of information. Isolation affects every inmate differently. Some break quickly, overwhelmed by the lack of human interaction. Others withdraw completely, shutting down as a way to cope. But Marcus didn't follow either path. Instead, he adapted. He began organizing his thoughts with precision, treating each day like a system to be analyzed. Every sound, every delay, every small inconsistency became part of a larger pattern he was trying to understand. This wasn't an escape plan. There was no physical way out of ADX Florence. But mentally, Marcus was building something. A map, not of the prison's layout, but of its behavior. And the more he focused, the clearer that map became. Officer Daniel Reyes had spent nearly a decade working at ADX Florence. He understood the environment better than most. He had seen inmates deteriorate under the pressure of isolation, their behavior becoming unpredictable and sometimes unstable. So when he noticed Marcus, it wasn't because of aggression or disruption. It was because of control. Marcus didn't behave like the others. He didn't show signs of panic or frustration. Instead, he appeared focused, almost too focused. His movements were deliberate. His expressions rarely changed. And at times, it seemed like he was listening to something no one else could hear. Reyes had seen instability before, but this felt different. This felt intentional. During a routine inspection, Reyes noticed markings on the wall of Marcus's cell. They weren't random scratches or signs of frustration. They were structured, precise, evenly spaced, almost mathematical. As he looked closer, he realized they formed a pattern, lines intersecting at specific intervals, small symbols repeated in sequences. It looked less like graffiti and more like a system being documented. And then there were the numbers. Reyes couldn't immediately understand what they meant, but it was clear they weren't meaningless. Marcus had been recording something, tracking something. The question was, what? If you're still watching, drop a like, because stories like this only get deeper the further you go. And what Marcus was building was just beginning. 6 months into his sentence, Marcus began exhibiting behavior that alarmed the staff. He would speak quietly to himself, sometimes pausing as if waiting for a response. At other times, he would sit completely still for hours, his focus locked on a single point. Then one day, the silence broke. Marcus began shouting loud, uncontrolled bursts of sound that echoed through the corridor. It continued for hours, then stopped just as suddenly as it began. When guards entered his cell, they expected chaos. Instead, they found him calm, composed, and smiling. Not the kind of smile that suggested relief, but one that hinted at understanding. When Reyes revisited the markings, something clicked. The lines weren't random. They were tracking intervals. The numbers corresponded to timing. Marcus had been documenting patterns in the prison's daily operations. Footsteps, door cycles, guard rotations. All of it from inside a single isolated cell with no visual access to the outside. It shouldn't have been possible, but Marcus had done it. Marcus hadn't broken under isolation. He had adapted to it in a way no one expected. He turned silence into structure, isolation into observation, and routine into data. In a system built to control him, he had found a way to understand that control. And once you understand a system, you begin to see its limits. When Marcus finally requested a meeting, it was granted under strict supervision. Reyes was present, along with a prison psychologist. They expected confusion, instability, or incoherence. Instead, Marcus spoke with clarity. He explained how the system worked, not in general terms, but in precise detail. Timing cycles, behavioral patterns, small inconsistencies that no one had noticed before. And then he said something that shifted the entire tone of the room. This place isn't perfect. It just hasn't been studied from the inside like this before. Days later, something unusual happened. A security camera in one corridor briefly lost signal. It lasted only seconds, but in a place like ADX, even seconds matter. When Reyes reviewed Marcus's notes again, he noticed something unsettling, a predicted gap, a tiny window of inconsistency. Marcus had identified it before it happened. Reyes realized that Marcus hadn't been trying to escape. He had been trying to prove something, that even in the most controlled environment ever built, there were still imperfections, not obvious ones, not exploitable ones, but real ones. And the fact that someone could identify them from total isolation changed the way Reyes saw the prison forever. Marcus Hale was eventually transferred out of ADX Florence. No public explanation was given. His records were sealed, and his cell was cleared as if nothing had ever happened. But the impact of his time there remained. ADX Florence still stands as one of the most secure prisons in the world. No escapes, no breaches, no failures in the way most people understand them. But Marcus's story reveals something deeper. That control isn't absolute. That isolation doesn't always break the mind. And that sometimes, under the right conditions, the human brain doesn't just survive. It evolves. Subscribe for more stories like this, because the most powerful battles aren't always fought with force. Sometimes they happen silently inside the mind.